I used to think the old stories were just that, stories. The kind you hear as a kid, told by your grandparents to keep you out of the forests at night. They would talk about demons, Oni, that stalked the mountains. But I never believed them. That was until I came face to face with one. It was last autumn. I'd gone hiking in the mountains alone, thinking it would be peaceful, a good way to clear my head. I'd been up those trails 100 times before. There was nothing new or dangerous about them. At least not until I decided to take a different path. I don't know why. I just did. It was late in the afternoon, and the sun was starting to dip below the horizon, but I wasn't worried. I thought I had plenty of time to explore. There was a narrow trail that branched off from the main one, barely visible, overgrown with shrubs and tangled roots. I figured it was just an old path no one used anymore. It felt inviting in a way, like it was calling to me. I know now that was a mistake. As I started down the path, everything changed. The air, for one. It became thick, like trying to breathe through wet cloth. And the quiet. It wasn't the usual stillness of the mountains. It was a suffocating silence, like the entire forest was holding its breath. No birds, no wind, just nothing. The further I walked, the more uneasy I felt. It was subtle at first, like the sense that something was watching me. But there was nothing there. I'd stop, turn around, and there would be only the trail behind me, dark and empty. But then I noticed the shadows. The trees seemed taller, darker, as though they were bending in toward the trail, narrowing around me. And the shadows between them, they were wrong. Too deep, too still, almost like they were watching me. That feeling of being watched grew heavier, more intense, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a tree, a gnarled, twisted figure up ahead. But as I got closer, I realized it was standing too still, too upright. Human-like, but not human at all. It was massive, taller than any person I've ever seen, with broad shoulders and a hunched frame, as though it was too large for the forest around it. My heart stopped. Its skin, gray and rough like weathered stone, stood out against the darkened trees. And the face, I'll never forget that face. It wasn't quite right. The features were too sharp, too distorted, like they had been stretched or twisted into something not meant to exist. The eyes, they were the worst. Empty, hollow, but they were locked on me, watching me. I couldn't move. My body froze, completely paralyzed, like it had taken every ounce of strength just to stay standing. My mind was racing, screaming at me to turn back, to run. But my legs, they wouldn't listen. I was rooted to the spot, staring at this thing that shouldn't exist. And then it moved. It didn't rush. It didn't lunge. It just took a step toward me, slow, deliberate. The sound of its footfall was soft but heavy, like something dragging itself through the earth. I felt my stomach drop, and a cold wave of dread washed over me. That was when I realized I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. It kept moving toward me, slow, calculated, as if it knew I couldn't escape. I could see its hands now, large, clawed fingers, dragging slightly against the ground as it walked, and its grin, that twisted, unnatural grin, too wide, like its face was splitting apart with each step it took. I still don't know how I managed it, but something inside me finally snapped. My legs jerked into motion and I turned and ran. My entire body felt numb, like I was moving underwater, the air thick and cold around me. But I ran. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I could hear it behind me. Those footsteps, slow and heavy, never speeding up, but always close. Always too close. The forest seemed endless, the path winding longer than I remembered. Every tree, every shadow felt like it was reaching out, trying to pull me back. But I kept running. I didn't know if I'd make it out. I didn't even know if I was running in the right direction anymore. But then, just as suddenly as it began, the feeling lifted. The air lightened, the forest opened up, and I stumbled back onto the main trail. When I finally stopped and turned around, the path I had been running down was gone. overgrown, like it had never existed in the first place. There was no sound of footsteps, no sign of the creature that had been following me. It was just gone. I didn't go back. I don't know what I saw that day. I don't even know if anyone would believe me if I told them. But I'll never forget it. The way it looked at me. The way it moved. Like it had been waiting for me all along. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind dies and the world goes quiet, I feel that same heavy silence, like something's out there, watching, waiting.